Wasatch Report, shooting straight on everything from prepping to politics.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wasatch Report. I am Suzanne Sherman, and you have tuned into the Survivalist Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. Today is Tuesday, December 18th, year of our Lord 2018. Got a great show set up for you today. Jeff Johnson is getting all the levels set up in our studio here, and when he's all set, we'll be bringing him with us. I've got a very special guest, a personal friend of mine, Eric Boettcher. He is a survivalist expert, and Jeff and I have been talking about some winter scenarios, vehicle preparations, and some things. And I just saw across our news feed here that there's a big storm coming. So this the timing is absolutely perfect. I want to remind you to follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Survivalist Radio Network. Consider joining our fan page, CRN, also on Facebook. And we have a SoundCloud page, YouTube page. Go ahead, subscribe, follow, share. The downloads are free on our SoundCloud. If you like what you hear, please tell your friends. We have tried boosting posts. Facebook, I think this shadow banning thing is real. I have thousands of followers and very few see our posts. So it's really up to those of you that are listening and like this show to get the word out so we can continue. We really like doing what we're doing. I'm just hopping over from an appearance I did on K-Talk out here in the Sandy area in Utah. And it's really amazing. And it's such a blessing to be able to reach such a large number of people on AM radio and continue this message. They were saying to me today, well, what can we do when the federal government oversteps its bounds? And we get to talk about nullification, interposition, the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, educate people on the proper interpretation of the Supremacy Clause, the Commerce Clause. The word is getting out. And what I hear, Jeff, is a lot of people are just wringing their hands and don't know what to do about an overgrown government. So that's what we're here to do, is teach people you can succeed at a personal level. You can be self-reliant. You can rely on yourself and not help from others. It all ties together because, folks, we are headed for a disaster one way or another. What we're doing is going to collapse. If you don't think so, drive around in the winter and see what's going to happen. And that's where my next guest comes in, because it's a very relevant topic. It is winter. There is a story on Fox that says, get ready for a rough winter. Polar vortex may be on the horizon, scientists warn. I'm going to just give you some details, and we're going to bring Eric on. Climate researchers are sounding the alarm on a polar vortex that's predicted to sweep through our East Coast later this month and inflict one of the harshest winters in years. In other words, a normal winter in Utah. Judah Cohen of the Atmospheric and Environmental Research told the paper his climate models indicate a vortex likely to hit in late December, early January. A disruption occurs when the stratosphere, where most of the weather occurs, suddenly warms, causing winds to change, decrease, or change directions, and it will be displaced and split apart, splitting cold air into the mid-latitudes. What does that mean? It's going to be freezing cold, but there's a way to prepare for that, both in your vehicle, with your home, planning for emergencies. Eric Boettcher, survivalist. Welcome to the Wasatch Report.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, no, I love what you said about, about being self-reliant. Being self-reliant is the foundation of actually protecting your freedoms, because guess what? You don't really need anybody. So I love that. And you cannot be self-reliant unless you can deal with winter. Everybody doesn't want to deal with it, but it's going to come just the same. So,
and we talk about this kind of preparation, and people say, well, I live in Florida. Well, we've seen how they get stranded in hurricane season. We're not going to focus on that right now. But Eric, you're out here in my neck of the woods in Utah, and you're used to the wintertime. What is it specifically that concerns you and that we should be concerned about that might not have your knowledge and expertise?
Generally speaking, people don't know how to deal with moisture, and they never have enough fuel to either melt their water. A lot of people have, I like to talk about, not maybe this the average crazy person that goes out into the wild in the, middle of winter, but thinking about like even if the gas and power to go out in your house, a lot of people have water stored. They have absolutely no way of accessing it if it's frozen, and water is a huge part of keeping yourself healthy and warm in the winter months. And people just don't have the right equipment, and they don't even know how to even approach winter because they never have to, because we have so many conveniences, and nature's kind of a cruel teacher. It doesn't give you a lot of chances. So it's up to us to be proactive and understanding the dynamics of winter so that we can deal with it. And we can. We're the most adaptable creatures on Earth. We just have removed ourselves from needing to know those crucial skills.
And it's so true. We really have softened our ability to be adaptable because we just rely on, I was talking, one of the things that really got me interested in this was an ice storm that happened in Maryland some time back. And as we know, when ice accumulates on the power lines cannot withstand that weight. All of a sudden, people are without power and they're standing in line for generators. They're standing in line for water. So let's start with the topic that you touched on, and that's preparing yourself in the home. You've been to my house and you can understand. I've actually been snowed in here a couple times and stayed here for a week or more, not leaving the property. And quite honestly, I'm just fine with that. But a lot of people aren't capable of doing that. Let's assume, though, you don't live in an area that is isolated like I am. And yes, I do this by choice. But what about people that might even live in an urban area and we have a situation, again, where the power is out and it's not safe to go out? How can we secure our home in an environment where it's very inhospitable to human survival in the wintertime? What can we do?
Well, first of all, I would like to make a comparison. You have taken a proactive approach to being prepared. We live in a reactive society. We react to disasters and we react to politics. Rarely do we ever proactively prepare. So there's not a whole lot you can do if you ignore preparedness. So if you didn't store water, guess what? You're going to survive. If you're going to have to go get water. Extra fuel, firewood. This is all stuff that you have to think about beforehand and act upon, because otherwise, if you're reacting, you're just going to be in the realms of luck and, hoping that your neighbor is nice enough to share with you. And, I would dare say his generosity is only going to go so far. So focusing on staying hydrated, staying warm, and having high calorie food stores because your body is the ultimate furnace. To be able to survive the night, you got to have enough food, you got to have enough calories. So I would really focus on, and I like a week. I think 72-hour kits are overrated because we all know we end up sharing the resources within a 72-hour kit, which then reduces the amount of time that's actually going to last. So, for one person, I like a 96-hour kit. That's a really good place to start, because in urban environments, food, water, shelter can be difficult. Now, your home's the ultimate shelter, but food and water may be extremely difficult to come by.
I love your statement about being reactive versus proactive. And as you know, I have multiple layers of means to heat my food, to not even, I have a stored water supply. I have a creek behind my house. If that supply runs out, I can go there. When you are in the reactive stage, now you're adding to not only acquiring water, you might have to figure out how you're going to purify that water. You might not be able to boil it. So if you don't have any means by which to filter and purify that water, you can add that as a layer of the problems you're going to experience. As far as food is concerned, yes, the high calorie foods. I love the packs. I love the ones that are freeze dried if you have to leave your place, or you can incorporate that as part of your diet, which is why I like your suggestion for a 96-hour kit. I have an extensive supply of canned goods and also home processed canned goods. At any time, I can go in there and get buffalo chili or venison stew, elk stew, whatever, ground elk. You can open up a can of this food and it is packed with calories and nutrition. Be able to open a can of something, you might not be able to heat it up, and take care of yourself and your family. Let's talk a little bit about vehicle preparedness. Oftentimes, we're driving around and we are in a short sleeve shirt, our heater's on to maybe a nice toasty, 90 for me, 80, 75 degrees in the vehicle. You slide off the road or a deer hits your car, something happens. Now the structural integrity of your vehicle is compromised. And you realize, like I did the other day, that notwithstanding your survival pack that I had in the car, but you left a heavy jacket at home. What happens? How should you prepare your car? And before you leave, also, I want to talk about what happens if you are caught out with absolutely nothing. Jeff and I discussed that scenario a couple days ago. So what about vehicle preparedness out here where we live and in other states that have significantly harsh winters?
Yeah, honestly, it's funny. I have done more news segments on vehicle preparedness than anything else because it's relevant. A lot of people, I laugh because they think that survival is, they often tell me I don't go camping anymore. And I just smile and I'm like, well, when you go camping, you pack food, water, shelter, you're already thinking in a survival situation versus when you jump in that car in your little business suit, and maybe if you're a woman, you're wearing stilettos, all that needs to happen. You drive 50 miles in in an area where there's a bunch of snow and maybe not a lot of help, and your car breaks down. How often does that happen? And then what are you going to do? Like we were discussing before, this is where the proactive mentality comes into play. You are most likely to experience a survival scenario in your car statistically. Pretty much everybody listening to my voice will eventually spend a night in their car if they have not done so already. So some of the things that I've touched on, let's start with the most basic. That one of those 96-hour kits, guess where it lives? It lives in your car.
Yep.
The other thing that you absolutely need is a car coat. Now, everybody says, oh, yeah, I throw a coat in the car. I'm not talking about the coat that you like to wear. This is the coat that your aunt gave you that you wouldn't be caught dead in. It's so ugly that it's going to stay in the car unless you're going to freeze to death. And then you're going to be so grateful for your pink polka dotted jacket because it's actually in the car when you want it.
Yes.
So that is one of the things that we tend to use the resources in our car because guess where we spend a lot of our time? In the vehicle. So you've got to be disciplined and not move the things in your car. So the 96-hour kit. I also highly suggest not using your brand new hunting boots. Maybe use the ones that you've retired that would be good enough for maybe, if necessary, a 10-mile walk out. But again, you're not tempted to use them, therefore they are going to remain in your car. And this is also a great place to make sure you have a way beyond your car battery to charge your phone, because let's be honest, one of the main reasons that a car stops working is because the battery goes bad. So plugging it in, and maybe you have just a couple hours with your phone working, and the tow truck or any external help outside is absolutely not going to even know you're there, especially if you went off the side of the road on I-80 down a ditch and you're sitting there wondering what to do in a blinding snowstorm. So anyway, sorry, that was a long tangent.
No, you mentioned stilettos earlier as well. And a friend of mine had posted an article. It's a little bit off topic, but the shoes, it just reminds me of how important, you cannot underscore the importance of proper footwear. The premise of this article was how people have really devolved. Once upon a time, they used to fly in airplanes and get dressed up for the matter. And they showed a woman in stilettos, nylons, and a shirt, like she was going to go on an airplane all dressed up. And my response to this, because this was not a preparedness-minded person, and I said, why she might look more presentable. Ultimately, the majority of plane crashes are survivable. Those nylons are going to melt and burn her skin severely, and those stilettos will likely fly off, and she will have no protection on her feet in the event she has to escape from a burning airplane. We think differently than other people, don't we, Eric?
Yes, no, but everybody should be thinking this way. But no, I guess that's very subjective of me, but really should.
And here in Utah, I mean, a lot of my driving is freeway driving. I'm on Interstate 80, unless I'm out in the mountains, like we like to go and go get our elk and our deer. But when we're just driving about to Park City or Evanston, and I go to my traditional hangouts, I'm just going along Interstate 80. If something happens, somebody will come along soon. Well, let's say help isn't around for 10, 15 minutes and it's 20 below outside, and I don't have a kit, and my car windows are broken or something like that has happened. You want to stay warm. Or if something happens and it's the middle of the night. My son got a lesson in preparedness when he was driving up our mountain road one night and going through an area called the Narrows. You drove by it when you were here. About midway up, he had to stop. There was something in the road, and he thought there were coyotes. There were 3 mountain lions. And he wasn't much of a believer in vehicle prepared kits because he's a race car driver. So he's all about weight reduction and having that car with as little stuff as possible. So I said, now, what would you do if you had a flat tire or something happens, your vehicle's inoperable? Are you going to get out and go for a walk in the middle of the night? And he said, no. So now he has a vehicle preparedness kit. But you think because you're always on the freeway, help is going to come soon. We had a crash out here. I think this was last winter. You'll probably recall this, Eric, on the Echo Canyon part of the 80-84 split. There were, I think, 30 trucks piled up in the dead of winter. Cars could not be taken out until I think it was overnight. So if something happens overnight, how are you going to do? What happens? There could be people around and help around, but you're not getting out of the area. You could be stranded. That's why vehicle preparedness kit is so, so important. Let's talk about people. There was a story, and it got national, pardon my French, recognition. The Kim family that got stuck in they decided to go through the forest over a Thanksgiving weekend. They had a toddler and an infant, husband and wife. They misread their map. We'll also talk about some navigation skills as well. Found themselves buried in the snow. They could no longer get the car out. I think you're familiar with that story. Yes. What happens if you are caught out in the middle of nowhere? What do you do? Is there anything you can do?
There's a lot you can do. Well, first of all, hopefully you have a well of knowledge to reach from. Now, when you get to the point where you're without equipment and you're without options, we've already done a lot of stuff wrong, but this is where your survival bank of knowledge comes into play, where you become that outdoor MacGyver. Now, some of these, when you start MacGyvering situations, you're more likely to fail than if you'd prepared and had some equipment. But you're not without hope, because in the end, we all need to be our own Swiss Army knife and have something to draw from. But you can't draw from an empty well. I can't emphasize that enough. This is where you got to read, you got to experience, and you got to get hands-on before this ever happens. Your car is probably one of the, as long as it's in a safe area and you're not have the potential of being hit, it's one of the best shelters around. Think about your tent. Even wind gets in there. Your car, by design, is windproof. Being in your car and just your body heat alone of one person in the standard sedan will raise the ambient temperature in there by an average of 20 degrees. And then you cut the wind chill factor completely out. So just, you don't venture away unless you absolutely have to from a car. Like I realize in this other situation, they ended up having to hike out. But, that isn't the first thing I would suggest.
Well, actually, the gentleman that hiked out trying to save his family perished. These people were completely unprepared. They thought, well, we'll take a scenic route through the forest. And there was a fork in the road, and they ended up taking a logging road that was not maintained. And as the snow got deeper and deeper, they finally got bogged down. I always tell people, if you're going through the snow or an area, plan for the area. Don't plan from where you're point A to point B. What are you going to experience throughout that? And that even implies if you're flying in an airplane, plan to survive the area through which you are traveling. So have a shovel to dig yourself out. Car mats. You can use a car mat to gain traction to get yourself out of the snow. They had no extra food for their kids, no diapers. I mean, this was just a miserable existence. And when he finally did leave, he perished. He was not prepared. So I also, this time of year, full tank of gas at all times. Just
Oh
keep it
yeah.
off. You need that winter. And I never really thought about this in California, but even when I lived there and we were driving at Christmas time, it could be 30 degrees at night, which is t-shirt weather in Utah. But if you're driving and you've got vehicle problems in California, that's not going to be comfortable if you're just wearing a dress that you're going to go to Aunt Rose's house in. So think about this. This is, as you said, this is common sense and it's applicable to everybody. Jeff and I were talking the other day. I saw this a show that's called, I'm sure you're familiar with it, I Shouldn't Be Alive.
Mm-hmm.
It was a gentleman who took his daughter. She was 11 years old. And in Canada, they open up these roads. And in fact, people use them instead of driving. It's just more fun to take these groomed trails to go from place to place on bobsleds, or I'm sorry, on snowmobiles. So it was 8 below. And he's questioning the wisdom of maybe venturing out for a few hours to drive to this next town to get to a hotel. And they're going to stay in different places. The daughter says, no, I want to go. All right. So they go. Well, what they showed was they didn't have any gear other than some light clothing. Now, obviously they're dressed appropriately for the sled ride, but they had only light clothing with them for when they got to the hotel and went to the next hotel. So what we're seeing here is they have absolutely no means of surviving from between point A and point B. The grooming machine was broken down. The trail got more and more bogged down with snow. And unfortunately, one of the rails was caught on the sled on a guardrail that catapulted this thing over into a ravine. The father was able to knock the daughter off, but this thing landed on him, shattered his knee, and she was able to drag him back up to the trail where hopefully somebody would find them. They had unwisely decided to continue their journey because the hotel they first found didn't have a swimming pool. So they thought, well, we'll drive a couple more hours at night and then get there at around 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So now this happens. They have nothing, and there's no cell service. What can people do that know they're not going to have a means to communicate with anybody, have with them to get attention, to get help?
Well, fire is your absolute best friend, especially at night. One of the main things I focus on in my class is I teach people about the fire triangle. And then I'm not talking about fuel, air, and heat. It is an actual triangle. So you have 3 separate fires that you would build, and they need to be about 30 paces apart, and they can be seen for a very, very long ways. I mean, even just a headlamp up on a mountain, often here in Utah, when you can watch hunters, if you get up early, you can see them going up the mountain. It's very visible as long as the atmospherics are good. And I mean, hopefully you had a radio, but again, when you're reacting, it's hard to know what you have, but what you do have, know how to use it. But in the winter, have 3 ways to start a fire. So you need, you can have a lens, you can have a ferrocerium rod, and you can have your matches. Fire, 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 fire. It will warm you. It will communicate with others, and it will help. It will allow you to survive long enough that you're going to have some options.
In an area where there's wildlife. I mean, this place was full of grizzly bears and wolves, and these people had absolutely no means by which to make a fire. This is where, and people think that this whole primitive survivalism thing is just kind of a silly little hobby or something that, it's cute and fun to do, but when are we really going to need it? Let's assume you don't have one of those means that you listed. Okay. Wouldn't it be nice to know how to build that friction fire? All of a sudden, that little bushcraft thing that you kind of laughed at people about can save your life. I tell people you cannot underestimate the importance of having these primitive skills.
Yes, and that is why at my core I'm a bushcrafter. So I spend much of the year, I am a friction fire expert. There are 5 different friction fires, but the one I tell everybody to learn is bow drilling. And please don't buy a kit. Go outside, learn wood compatibility, learn what woods work with what. A lot of people have the misconception of you can you just grab any 2 old sticks. So that's your first path to failure. But your shoelaces and a couple sticks and the knowledge of how to build and use a bow drill. I taught a 95-year-old woman up in Snowbird this summer, and she got her first friction fire in 95 years. But it's not so much a matter of strength. And in fact, I think last time I was up at the compound, you and I were playing around with a bow drill, and it is very doable, and it can save your life. And again, I don't count that as,
by the way.
Go ahead. Yes.
I still have it.
Do you still have it? But yeah, it's fire. Fire is where the foundation comes from. I mean, you can't purify. Ultimately, you purify your water with fire. You cook your food with fire. You stay warm with fire. You can communicate with fire. Fire is life, and a man without fire is a man without life, is something I've often quoted saying. But yes, but again, this is not something you can just read a book on. You've got to read the book. You got to get the sticks, and you've got to get the technique down till you are an absolute expert. Because anytime you're starting a fire in the wilderness, I always tell people, imagine the worst conditions possible. And if your skills aren't up to par to handle those conditions, often people will practice bow drilling in ideal conditions. Maybe when it's blowing outside, grab that bow drilling kit, go outside and learn how to deal with the elements and still be successful. Proactive, proactive, proactive. Yes, bushcrafting can save your life.
Just having one option or a lighter. And I always keep, I just went through my vehicle bag as well. And I have different means by starting a fire. But again, I think it was somebody on a loan had to actually tap out because they lost their little fire starter and they didn't have a primitive skill. They could have stayed out there and possibly won a lot of money. I want to see if Jeff wants to chime in, because you met Jeff over here up at the compound.
Yes.
I know this is a topic that he loves to discuss, and then we'll let you head on out of here in a few minutes after you tell everybody how they can take your courses and get your books. Jeff, do you have anything you want to say?
Actually, it's just kind of funny because in just a second on our Facebook page, there's going to be a picture of Eric with this bow drill at the compound.
Oh, I love it.
So that's what I was just doing in the background. Yes. As for the clothing in the vehicle, I keep specific clothing in my vehicle all year long. It's actually, they're tucked up underneath the front seats, because the back seat of my pickup, I can tuck it up under the front seat. So I have clothing on one side and I have rain gear on the driver's side underneath the seats. It's a great place to put them. It's out of the way, so I never touch them. They stay there forever. That was a great thing. And Eric, I love that line about being our own Swiss Army knives. Perfect line. Love it.
And, this isn't something you have to be an expert to do. You can rely on the experts to teach us that. That being said, Eric, how can we learn more? You have an outstanding book on survivalism that is comprehensive. Let's talk about your books and your courses for a few minutes.
Absolutely. So I wrote the book series, Staying Alive. I've got another book coming out. Everything can be found on my website, which is ericboetchersurvivalist.com. I also have released my ebooks, so you can purchase them on Amazon Kindle. And again, it's the Stay in Life series. All the links are on there. I teach a lot of courses. So I've got, I teach up at Snowbird. I also am offering a wintertime course, which is a 2-day, 1-night bushcraft camp in which I teach you to survive the night without a sleeping bag and how to strategize and actually do that. I also have a lot of great links. I just have to chime in and say that clothing, like you were saying, is huge for winter. If anybody knows me, Fortress Clothing, which is actually a Utah company, makes the best winter gear ever, and that's all I wear. And so I got a lot of reviews on the gear that I have vetted personally, that really can do a lot for you. But yeah, if you jump on my site, you can sign up for a course. If you want to come up in the summertime, I offer courses up at Snowbird, or we'll just go out. I try to keep my group smaller, under 12, so you get a lot of personal instruction, and I will absolutely push you. So leave the marshmallows at home, and you'll learn how to actually get home if you are actually caught out in the elements without anything, because again, you got to become a Swiss Army knife, but you have to have something to draw from.
We're planning another get together after PrepperCon again this year, so mark your calendar, Eric. Also, Eric ERIC Boettcher, Boettcher. Did I get that right?
Yes.
.com, and it's a comprehensive website, has all that information. I'd even welcome you to host some of your classes here. You're more than welcome to do that. Come up here.
That'd be awesome.
So let's see, Jeff, we will make sure that we get all that information for his books and the classes and the website up. I've already put that up on my page, but we'll make sure everybody can hear that as well. And we gave you a shout out on K-Talk as I had to jump off early so we could do this. So I want to thank you for joining us, Eric Boettcher. Please follow him on Facebook. Go to his webpage. Learn. This stuff could save your life. How would you feel if you're driving your vehicle, you're somehow incapacitated, or you're stuck in your house with the snow? You can't feed your kids. The information is there. There's a difference between first responders and an immediate responder. Be there. There's really no excuse. These books, I think some of them are available for free on Kindle. So I want to thank you for joining us. Jeff, we're going to cut to a break, and then we'll come up to some of our other normal topics that we've got some stuff going on about the Broward County case negligence. So we'll be back. This is the Wasatch Report here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. We'll be right back.
Fair enough. Okay, Roger, your special subject tonight is the economies of the European community. Your time starts now. Best of luck.
Thank you.
How much does Greece owe, Roger?
$367 billion.
Correct. And who do they owe it to?
Mostly to the other European economies.
Correct. How much does Ireland owe?
$865 billion.
Correct. And who do they owe it to?
Other European economies, mostly.
Correct. How much do Spain and Italy owe?
$1 trillion each.
Correct. Who to?
Mainly France, Britain, and Germany.
Correct. And how are Germany, France, and Britain going, Roger?
Well, they're struggling a bit, aren't they?
Correct. Why?
Because they've lent all these vast amounts of money to other European economies that can't possibly pay them back.
Correct. So what are they going to do?
They're going to have to bail them out.
Correct. Where are they getting the money to do that, Roger?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one.
How much does Portugal owe?
Hang on a minute. What was the answer to that earlier question?
Just keep answering the questions, Roger. Where is Portugal going to get the money it owes to Germany if Germany can't get back the money that it lent to Italy?
Just a minute. What was the answer to the previous question? The question was, how can broke economies lend money to other broke economies who haven't got any money because they can't pay back the money the broke economy lent to the other broke economy and shouldn't have lent it to them in the first place because the broke economy can't pay it back?
You're wasting very valuable time, Roger. How much money does Spain owe to Italy?
$41 billion, but where are they going to get it?
Correct. What does Italy owe to Spain?
$27 billion, but they haven't got it. They're broke.
Correct. How can they pay each other if neither of them has any money?
They're going to get a bailout, aren't they?
Correct. And where's the money coming from for the bailout?
That's what I'm asking you.
Correct. Why are people selling the European currency and buying the US dollar?
Because the US economy is so much stronger than the European economy.
Correct. Why is that, Roger?
Because it's owned by China.
Correct. And very well done. And after that round, you've lost $1 million.
I've lost $1 million. I thought you said well done.
Yes, well done. You've only lost $1 million. That's an extraordinary performance, Roger.
I've only lost $1 million.
Very well done.
And that's quite good, is it?
Oh, it's excellent.
Sell everything immediately. Quickly.
Cerberus Radio Network, protecting liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Wasatch Report. I'm Suzanne Sherman. Jeff Johnson joins me in our virtual studio here at the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom From the Flames of Tyranny. If you missed the first half of our show, go back, download it on SoundCloud. Eric Boettcher, Survivalist, joined us for a fantastic discussion on cold weather survival. He will be returning when we want to discuss other such survival issues as well. A lot of fun. Jeff, that little bit you played on the break, is that not the perfect explanation as to the evils of strong centralized governments such as what we have in the European Union and what we have essentially in these United States, or this United State? What do you think?
Well, yeah, we're in debt $22 trillion. Well, who's going to, we need a bailout, don't we?
Well, we had this discussion on federalism and the problem with a runaway central government over on K-Talk. That was a great discussion over there. We're going to continue a little of that over here. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to get our message out to so many people. And I want to continue a little bit along those lines. I want to also encourage you to please join us. We have a group called Peaceful Political Divorce Discussion Group over on Facebook as well. And we talk about why secession is such a fantastic option to rein in this overpowerful, illegitimate government in Washington, D.C. Nobody's talking about overthrowing it, but we can certainly take their powers away by peacefully living amongst ourselves and stripping away their power, which they have grabbed for themselves in direct contravention to our Republican system of government that was supposed to be federal and not national, beg your pardon, in nature. That being said, Jeff, I have a case here, a story coming out of Salt Lake City. You're aware of Proposition 2, which is a citizens movement, a proposition to legalize the medical use of marijuana. That passed, and the legislature, as they are constitutionally in the state of Utah allowed to do, have change this all a little bit. A lot of people are upset because they say it's not what we voted for, and the legislature said, well, we fixed it. This is an article that says the U.S. attorney for Utah reviewing how to deal with medical marijuana law. And this is what's funny, because the way they even state this, the U.S. attorney for Utah, no, he's not a U.S. attorney for Utah. He happens to be squatting in Utah. Feds have no authority to be here, especially when it comes to this issue. Again, according to the Constitution as ratified, there are 3 criminal offenses that they have the authority to prosecute and punish: piracy on the high seas, treason, and counterfeiting. The Controlled Substances Act is unconstitutional. I refer you to my article in the 10th Amendment Center called Parchment and Plants, What Prohibition Can Teach Us About the Drug Wars. So here's how the article opens up. Federal law enforcement officials are reviewing Utah's new medical marijuana law and to decide how it affects the job they do in the state. Jeff, what job do they have regulating marijuana in the state of Utah?
I'm still, I got my Constitution. I'm still looking.
Okay, keep looking.
When I find it.
Okay. This is what U.S. Attorney John Huber says. It's of great concern to us, the marijuana impact in Utah. It was then, it is now. It's still against federal law that cannot be forgotten. Utah voters approved the ballot of initiative in November. But Huber said that marijuana use, production, distribution, and transportation violates federal law. That was lost in the debate over the initiative. You know why? It's inapplicable to us. Huber said the Department of Justice allows individual U.S. attorneys to decide how to enforce marijuana laws in their districts. What was a hands-off approach previously under the Obama administration, whatever handcuffs or restraints that were placed upon me are gone. And I have a lot of discretion to see best how to use our limited resources. Limited? He's got to be kidding. I've got to think about these things with my partners to see where we should use our resources and what is drug trafficking and exploitation and profiteering. So here we have a United States attorney who's going to use his power to thwart the will of the citizens of the sovereign state of Utah. The arrogance, the absolute arrogance. He also cites, and this is what I discussed also on K-Talk, he warns that the legalization of medical marijuana does not give carte blanche to those wishing to use the drug. It is still illegal to possess it or transport it in large amounts, and only patients with qualifying conditions can possess it at all. He said the federal authorities prosecute marijuana cases at in the state every month. Now, here's the thing. Remember the the originalist Ted Cruz chided the Obama administration for not prosecuting, for the hands-off approach that was discussed earlier in this article. That is what we consider to be an originalist. An originalist chiding the government for minding its own business in an area over which they had no constitutional authority. Do you remember that, Jeff?
Yes, I do.
So let's see. We have now also an attorney this is an article out of the Salt Lake Tribune, and it's by a gentleman who is an attorney and the former mayor of Salt Lake City. And he says here that the Utah Constitution recognizes that the power being inherent in the people is essential to the security of individual rights and the perpetuity of free government. So he's talking about now, by passing Proposition 2, as I said earlier, the people of the state voted to have a free market system of distributing medical cannabis. I disagree with that, because there was never a free market system. This was all going to be subject to the licensing by the state. So I think that claim is absolutely disingenuous. So the legislature, as I said, passed they had a special session, and they modified this law. And again, what they're saying is that they've modified this law, and now they're setting up a system that violates federal law because this is a state system of distributing marijuana. Well, what I say, I don't see that and that perspective being any different from Proposition 2. But what troubles me is that they are citing, he's citing this, and the other attorney as well, exemption, where the federal laws conflict with the state laws, that the federal laws reign supreme. That is not the case. That is only the case when now they're citing the Supremacy Clause. Again, the Supremacy Clause in Article 6, that the Constitution and the laws of the United States in the pursuance thereof shall be the law of the land. So, Jeff, what does that tell you? Which law is going to take effect? The Federal Controlled Substances Act or the laws of 33 states and D.C. legalizing marijuana in one form or another?
I'm not quite sure, because the state should be saying no to the federal government. They passed these laws. It's legal in their states, and they should just be saying no. Now, with the convolution of the money train, because the states are complicit with the federal government now in the theft of this money, because then the federal government launders it and sends it back to the states. Who knows what the states are going to do? This is why this whole discussion of secession is so important, because not only do we need to leave the present states and the federal government, we also need to leave pretty much the states and form new governments in our local areas.
And what I'm seeing too is they're criticizing the states or Utah for making it more difficult to get a product that is already violating federal law. So none of this makes sense whatsoever. I referred to this as Prop 2 drama out in the state of Utah. I really don't understand how hard it is for the feds to simply decriminalize it and then let the states, and when I mean decriminalize it, just repeal the entire Controlled Substances Act and the DEA. Again, that's something that sounds absolutely extreme, but that would be in conformance with the Constitution as ratified. These were issues that were left to the states. But, even conservatives love their drug wars. What did Jeff Sessions say? Pot smokers are bad people and they need to be punished. So now we have criminal justice reform going in, that's being discussed in Congress as well. So again, I say the same thing time and time again, unless they're going to banish every federal law other than piracy on the high seas, treason, and counterfeiting, any federal reform in this area is really, just throwing crumbs in our directions. But here's actually an article on Newsmax where Senator Rand Paul says that the criminal justice bill may get 80 votes. And again, I'll say this is a step in the right direction, but again, it's piecemeal reform. What he says is this is one of the few issues that right and left are coming together on. So they're going to be releasing some nonviolent felons, restoring some of the voting rights to nonviolent felons. And I agree with this. I just, again, take serious exception to the federal government punishing so many of these crimes. I remember being in court in a superior court when I was practicing law in California, and I was a new admittee to the bar, and one of the partners, beg your pardon, in my law firm, was taking me out and showing me the ropes, and we're at a sentencing hearing, and he's showing me the rules in our book, and he says, okay, now here are the state guidelines and here are the federal guidelines for these crimes. And what I should have said was, well, what the hell business is the Fed think that they have telling us what our sentencing guidelines should be? But we're not taught that as lawyers. We are taught to kowtow to whatever is handed down to us from Washington, D.C., whether or not it is within their delegated powers and not rights. I don't like when they say governments have rights. Human beings have rights. Jeff, I think you sent me a note when I was discussing that very issue on K-Talk. You want to elaborate on that? Yes,
the person you were on with, and I'm not going to bring up his name, it's not really about him, it stated that the federal government's rights, the states' rights, and I just texted back to you, the states don't have rights. Human beings have rights. We have them inherently. It's not given to us by government. We have them. If you're not a Christian, you might say by nature, they're natural. We have them. As Christians, we say they're God-given rights. They're inalienable rights, as Jefferson called them. But to say the states have rights is incorrect. They don't have rights. They have authority delegated to them by the people by the consent of the governed. That's the difference. The states don't have authority in and of themselves. It's what's given to them. Now, they have usurped that, and we have what we have today, but that doesn't change the fact that we have the rights, we have the authority to set up governments, and we need to take that authority back.
Here's an interesting case I had set aside for us to talk about. I also talked about it on K-Talk. The federal court, or a federal court, says we have a constitutional right to feed the homeless. Again, we have this overwhelming desire to refer to these natural pre-existing rights as constitutional rights. The problem is when you call them rights instead of restrictions upon the general government, they take it upon themselves to regulate these rights. What happens when they regulate them in a manner, as they almost always do, that always restricts our rights? This is an interesting case here. A federal appeals court has ruled that people have a constitutional right to share food with the homeless in public places. This is a case arising out of Florida. Food Not Bombs took the city of Fort Lauderdale to court after the city passed a law banning outdoor feedings of the homeless. So the federal government gets involved over a local ordinance 11th Circuit Court of Appeals overturned a lower court's decision saying that the trial judge was wrong to dismiss the grounds on the case on the grounds that the First Amendment didn't apply. Jeff, does the First Amendment apply to the actions of us citizens or the ordinances of local communities or states?
No. And I've said numerous times on my show, and you've said it on your show, and I know you said it on K-Talk today. The first 5 words of the First Amendment make it very clear. Congress shall make no law. This is an absolute restriction on the federal government. It has nothing to do with the states. The states have their own. I would guarantee you that Florida and Utah, and I know Pennsylvania does, they all have their own quote-unquote First Amendment in their Constitution. That is the restriction on the states. And that's what applies in these cases, not the federal statute.
So let's say this goes up to the Black Robe Messiahs now, and they decide that the 11th Circuit was correct. Now we're going to have another opinion that rules 328 million people, that says you have a First Amendment right. Or what if they decide that they don't? Now across this continental landmass, nobody's going to be free to feed the homeless on their own? Is this what the war for independence was fought for? If you think so, you go to a little piece of grass and there's a cordoned off place in Lexington, Massachusetts, where the first 8 people died in the fight for our freedom, and you go tell them you're sorry. They gave up their lives for nothing. Imagine a system where 9 politically connected lawyers in their black government-issued costumes can say nobody on this continental landmass has a right to free the homeless. That's the chance you're taking when you keep running to the federal judiciary over state issues, over matters concerning nothing to do with rights, powers delegated to them, the powers that did not be, the powers not delegated to the general government remained with the state. That is the heart and soul of our system of federalism, folks. I don't understand why this is so hard and why people keep running to the federal judiciary. We were discussing also, I had this set aside, Jeff, a case out of Broward County. Again, we all saw the images of the police officer, the SO, who failed to confront the Parkland shooter. He was seen cowering behind his car. Other law enforcement officers ran right in. Well, ex-deputy Scott Peterson, they call him the coward of Broward, claimed in court. Now he's being sued for negligence. So to file a suit for a civil suit for negligence, you have to show that there was a duty owed to the plaintiff, that duty was breached. There is a causative effect between the breach and the damages. What they're saying here in defense is that there was no duty of care owed. No legal duty can be found, said his attorney. At the very worst, Scott Peterson is accused of being a coward. That does not equate to bad faith. Where do you think they came up with the notion that police officers have no duty to protect an individual? The Supreme Court. What a surprise. This is actually district court, Warren versus District of Columbia. The court here said, again, this is a matter of a federal court handing down a decree as to what obligations law enforcement has to citizens in a community. The court stated that the fundamental principle of American law is that a government and its agents are under no duty to provide public services such as police protection to any individual citizen. This case arose from some people that were that had been taken hostage, and they were treated in barbaric circumstances. I'm not going to get into here, but they had argued that the police were alerted twice. The police had a specific duty to protect them from the harm to which they were alerted. The court ruled in favor of the police, what a surprise, following the well-established rule that official police personnel and the government employing them are not generally liable to victims of criminal acts for failure to provide adequate police protection. A Supreme Court, Erie Railroad Company versus Tompkins, actually had said that there is no clause in the Constitution that purports to confer such power upon the federal courts, meaning to rule on such matters. But as we've seen now, they've taken it among themselves to do what they may with that. So, okay, so here we have this. There's nothing we can do. This is what everybody's accepted. What do we do now, Jeff? This is what we talk about. Your safety, your survival is your responsibility. If you choose to put your kids in the public school system, just like anything else in life, we talked about the first half hour of this show, we talked about preparedness. If you're going to put your kids in these situations, or if you're going to go out even in public, always have a plan to deal with these situations. You don't know when these situations are going to come up, but and the odds are you'll never encounter one. Wouldn't it be preferable to have a plan? Obviously, there's sometimes where you're not going to escape a shooter like this, but wouldn't you like to go over with your kid ways to deal with these scenarios? Let your kid, rather than waiting for a first responder, be their own immediate responder and have some sort of strategy to cope with this situation. Again, they won't always be successful. We talk about this all the time. Look at these people. You have a home invader. Average time, it can take maybe 10 minutes to get police to your house. What do you think can happen to you or your family in 10 minutes? So again, your personal protection, your survival is always up to you. Your kids are in the public school system. If you're not going to get them out, have some sort of a strategy for them. You know, Jeff, they have these they have these bulletproof backpacks available that you can send your kids to school with. I question the wisdom of anybody putting their child in a situation that's so dangerous, you have to send them with a bulletproof backpack. Are you crazy?
At that point, you know, my whole thing all along is always called homeschooling a personal secession. It's a way for you to say no to government and to take control of your family and your children's future, giving them a better future, making them critical thinkers, not government thinkers.
And yeah, exactly. You have the benefit of raising them in a manner which conforms to your values. They're not going to be taught. I just saw an article the other day that they are going to be taking out the classics from education now. And we've seen it also with Common Core. How many of these kids are instructed upon about global warming, social justice? They're not reading the classics. All the transgender indoctrination, all these issues that really should be taught at the home if the parents so desire. They actually have a day I'm seeing where they call it adulting, where they're taught how to live like, oh, shouldn't this be part of the curriculum? How to, you know, your banking, all these things, changing attire. When I was at school, I remember auto shop and wood classes. These are the things. We had one called home economics, where we were actually taught cooking and how to properly clean up our kitchen after that. I don't even know if they have it anymore, but you can teach that in a homeschool environment and not have to worry about the active shooter situations as well. It was just kind of a frustrating thing reading about this. And because you have to understand also with regard to the Broward police officer, you know, police officers, law enforcement, the first responders, they're taken from a segment of the general population. They're not infallible. They're going to want to get home to their families. Not all of them are going to rise to the occasion. Ultimately, it is up to you. Have a plan wherever you are to be there for your kids, or have them understand how to think for this, you know, think for themselves on this. It's an absolutely tragic situation. But I have to say, you know, let these matters and liability be determined at the local level. I think it would be detrimental to expect police officers to have a personal duty to protect the individual. It might discourage some from joining, but if that's the case, that's the case. At least they know what they're getting into. I think we're almost out of time, aren't we, Jeff?
Yes, we are. We got 1 minute.
All right. Well, I want to remind you, you can follow us over again on Facebook. Listen to us on SoundCloud. We have 24 hours of programming on Radio Code. Just go over to our page, listen to it on your phone, keep us in the background. You'll learn something. We've got the Mark and Suzanne show, revolutionizing radio. Jeff with the paradigm shift, loving liberty, what's Greg's show again? I forgot the name of it.
Liberty Minutes.
Thank you. Liberty Minutes with Greg Carpenter. Case in point, Dave Benner's new to the network. So want to thank you for listening. This has been the Wasatch Report here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. Thank you for listening.